In the heart of rural Herefordshire is the busy market town of Ross-on-Wye, famed for its salmon fishing and the beautiful countryside which surrounds it. Winifred Foley was born in 1914, a few miles from Ross-on-Wye. Her childhood autobiography, A Child in the Forest, is now considered a modern classic. In her narration of The Lost Street, she includes some of her personal reminiscences of shopping in that period.
I grew up in the harsh economic climate of the 1920s in a Forest of Dean mining community. There was little money for Mum to go shopping with, but plenty to interest and excite us children looking at the contents of the shops. Come with me now and share my thoughts and memories as a young girl into the Lost Street. Saturday was shopping day. Dressed in my tidiest clothes, I walked with Mum the 2 miles to town, sometimes with my little brother as well. First we went to the grocer's. The grocer was a kindly man. We could perch on a chair by his counter whilst he wound up a toy car. Round the wheels would go, whilst the engine driver tooted his horn and the little girl and boy passengers waved. Whilst he served Mum with lard, flour, salt, tea, Reckitt's blue and a tin of treacle, etc., my eyes could feast on the fancy signs and pictures on the cabinets and tins, the peaceful setting of the boat on the lake, and oh, how lovely the ladies looked. Mr. Hudson's balloon soaring in the sky, the dainty little girl on the Jacob's sign, and the boys and girls dancing under the rainbow on Mr. Chiver's sign. What a variety of biscuit tins, sentry boxes, boats, cars, and those lovely toy tin buses and lorries, all filled with biscuits. My brother wished Mum could afford those, so we could have the tins to play with. Mum could only buy the loose broken biscuits, a bagful for 4p. By then she'd spent her 4 shillings budget. Out to the grocer's, I would run ahead to gaze in the window of my favourite shop with shelves of beautiful dolls. I longed with all my heart and soul for one of them. I never even harboured a hope of owning my favourite one in the corner of the window. She was almost as big as me. She had beautiful blonde hair, big blue eyes, and she was dressed in a purple velvet costume. Oh, how I loved that doll and wanted her for my own. But she was priced at 5 guineas, and I rarely got even a halfpenny to spend, so I would be an old woman before I could save enough to buy her. I had one hope, Father Christmas. I didn't expect to get that special doll, because I knew I wasn't a very good little girl, so I shouted up the chimney, asking for one of the small ones off the shelf. As Christmas drew near, my persistence and my hopes were a terrible worry to Mum. Desperately she fashioned me a doll from what was at hand in our poverty-stricken home, a threadbare black woolen stocking stuffed with newspaper, with 2 odd buttons for eyes and a red woolen gash for a mouth. Tearfully disgusted on Christmas morning, I told her, "You can't pay the Christmas and can have that ugly bugger back." But when it was wrapped up by Mum with a piece of old shawl and with a real baby's bonnet on, I grew passionately fond of my little pickaninny. When my little brother came shopping with us, he would look longingly at the trains and their long carriages. some run by clockwork, some by steam, and even an electric one. I'm going to be an engine driver one day, and I should drive an engine bigger than this shop, he bragged. Sometimes we went into the shop for a proper look round. There were so many different toys, cars and buses and novelties to be wound up, rows and rows of soldiers, farm animals, and even a Charlie Chaplin who waved his stick when you wound him up. There were money boxes, steam engines, and penny toys, and a great assortment of games, and among the dolls' prams a beautiful big doll's house. But I used to wonder, how would Father Christmas find a chimney big enough to get that down? Mum had a terrible job to drag me from that shop window. Come on, Polly, she would scold. We ain't got all day. We had to go to the chemist next. Mum said I ought to call it the what and why shop. Why are there rows and rows of little drawers? What are they for? What's in them? Why has the clock got Beecham's pills written on it? And are they really worth a guinea a box? And why do you have to pay a penny to weigh yourself? Why are there so many bottles on the shelves? There seems to be hundreds. And why so many different colours? And why does it always smell so funny? I asked myself these questions every time we went in there. I loved the picture of the pig on the sign in that shop. It reminded me of our Suki in the cot at the bottom of our garden. The chemist always had a large display of Japanese vigor tonic in the window. Grandpa reckoned it would cure anything, but he took it and he still had an awful cough. As well as the many different cures for people's illnesses, the chemist also sold bottles, tins and packets of all kinds for the troubles of animals, promising cures for pigs, sheep, cows, horses, fowls, dogs and cats. Sometimes we would stop by Mr. Butcher's wireless and motorcycle shop for the carbide for Dad's pit lamp. It used to fascinate me to watch Dad fill it up with a sneezy grey powder in the bottom and water in the top. Then he would put a match to the nozzle of the lamp and get a flame. That was an early taste of real magic. But this was a small mystery compared to what I was shown next. Among the many wirelesses of different shapes and sizes and tall trumpet-like speakers that lined the shelves of the shop was a small box. Mr. Butcher put the little box on the counter. Opening the lid, he said, "This is a crystal set, young lady." He touched a piece of shiny, odd-shaped stone with a bit of wire that he called a cat's whisker. Then he put a thing on my ears and told me to listen, and I would hear people talking in London. And I did.
This is the BBC Home Service. Here is the news.
I remembered that the first time I heard a telephone was in Mr. Butcher's shop. It rang so sudden and so loud, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I watched him talk into the little mouthpiece for a minute, and I marvelled. They talked to people along wires, they get boxes to play music. Whatever next? But I loved all these miraculous things. Mr. Butcher sold motorbikes as well, but I didn't like them. They were much too noisy and they went too fast. But my brother loved them all right, and on Saturday mornings he would often be found up at Mr. Mason's helping him to clean and fix his old motorbike. And my brother reckoned that when he was old enough to go to work down the pit, he would save up till he got one. When I said we had nowhere to put it, he said it could go in the cot with a pig at night. Two stinkers together, I thought. Occasionally I would go into what was called the talking machine shop on the corner at the end of the street, through a lovely pair of etched doors saying gramophone department. The shop was always full of shelves of gramophones with large horns that were shaped like the convolvulus flowers that grew wild up the side of our privy at the bottom of the garden. There were red, blue, green ones, wooden petal-shaped ones, and a huge brass one that curled around like a trumpet. These machines played a flat disc. Sometimes I would see Mr. Oxley demonstrating one of the machines, and I would stand and listen to yet another magical mystery. He had small children's gramophones with pictures of children and gnomes on the side. My friend who lived in a big house up the road from me had one of these for Christmas, and she would sometimes play it for me to see how it worked. She always had a lot of pretty tins with the gramophone needles in, with different designs which I found fascinating. She would place a record on, wind the handle, push a little lever at the side, and the music would come through a small trumpet. I loved the little dog that stood in front of one of the gramophones in the shop. Mr. Oxley called it my little nipper. I would have loved a real one to play with. Mr. Oxley sold what my dad called phonographs. They played a record through a horn, the same as the gramophones, but the record was cylinder-shaped, and they came in round little boxes of different colours and designs and were stacked in rows on the shelves of the shop. Some of these machines had glass covers and were used in fairgrounds. You put a penny in the slot, turn the handle, and the machine would play automatically.
It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, little sweet.
He even had one machine there that you had to turn by hand. There was no spring, so when you stopped turning the handle, the record slowed to a stop. He said it was one of the first ones ever made. It wasn't as nice as my friend's. Perhaps that was why he still had it. He probably couldn't sell it. Right at the very end of the street was a tiny shop that sold all manner of curiosities. I never went in there, but something caught my eye in the window one day. Among the clocks and typewriters, medical and scientific instruments was a light bulb. Now you may wonder what's special about a light bulb. But this was no ordinary light bulb. Decorating the front was a picture of the young Prince Edward. I thought, what an extraordinary thing to put on a light bulb. Would have been no use to us anyway. We had no electricity.
Here we go. Good morning. Okay.
In the draper's shop, Mam rarely bought anything but a reel of cotton or some darning wool, but I loved to look at the glamorous hats with enormous feathers, the lace and the ribbons, and pretty fans, among which was a huge, beautiful red-feathered one. If a woman's hair is her crowning glory, it deserves a hat to set it off, and oh, how lovely they were as I remember them. Wide-brimmed straw hats, trimmed with flowers and ribbons, and of course, sometimes the trimmings were overdone. This was certainly the case with our old great Aunt Sunday hat. To suit her long widowhood, it was black, made of straw, and over the years she had become like a magpie, collecting any shiny or fanciful object that was black, to add to the original trimmings. The hat had got top-heavy on her frail old neck. One Sunday, very tired after her last effort to get to chapel, she thankfully removed it and told me to take it up onto her bed. I did so, and laid it carefully in the middle of the old-fashioned white counterpane. Just after dusk, she decided to go to bed, and was furious to see what she took to be that dratted black cat from next door on her bed. She always held it responsible for bringing in fleas, so she gave it a sharp whack with her walking stick. To her surprise, the lazy creature didn't move. Furious, she spent all her feeble strength beating it, and still it didn't move. Overcome with guilt, she went to stroke the creature, only to discover that the black cat was her battered and ruined hat. I turned my snub nose up at the display of cotton drawers, even those with lace around the frills at the bottom of the legs. We had to make them at school of stiff, unbleached calico. They showed beneath your frock and got you teased by the boys. It didn't stop Granny getting my baby sister to sleep with the rhyme, cups and saucers, plates and dishes, all little girls should wear calico britches. I remember our paraffin lamp that stood like a queen in the middle of the table, providing a gentle light for the dark hours of evening. The exquisite display of them and the glassware here makes me drool. But when I see these lamps, a thread of guilt runs in my thoughts. On occasions in domestic service, I had to wash and dust beautiful epergnes like these, and it was a dreaded chore in case I broke one. We lived with an aged great-aunt and used her lamp. It had a china bowl with flowers on, a treasured heirloom to her. It was not a desire to be helpful that made me offer to clear the supper table one evening. I thought it would give me the chance to damp my finger and dip it into the sugar basin before putting it away in the little back kitchen. Concentrating on this ploy made me clumsier than usual, and I hit the china lamp bowl with the sugar basin. It broke, and the paraffin spilled over the table and onto the precious remains of a loaf of bread. Like Humpty Dumpty, all my wailing and all the scoldings I got could not put that lamp back together again. It was a dark episode in my life, made darker for us all by having only a candle to see by until we got another lamp. The street was always full of gaily coloured signs that were fascinating to our childish eyes. Huntley and Palmer's ginger nuts, Oxo, Fry's cocoa, Sunlight soap, Quaker oats, Black Cat cigarettes, Ogden's guinea gold, and my favourite one, which had a pretty little robin standing on a basket of washing to advertise starch. Some of the boys would throw stones at the signs and chip huge pieces out of them. Still, as my dad said, boys will be boys. When a windfall of a penny or a halfpenny came my way, it was straight to the sweet shop. Oh, the dilemma of choosing from the rich assortment on display. Should I buy the fried chocolate bar? It was very tempting, but it melted so quickly in the mouth. No, better to buy some humbugs or licorice or toffee that would give me hours of chewing. Whilst my sweets were weighed and bagged, my eyes would be drawn to some of the pretty cabinets containing tobacco, and the endless number of colourful tins which contained tobacco and cigarettes, and above them the signs that advertised the tobacco, and I would gaze at my reflection in the mirrors on the wall of the little shop. Oh, my dad loved his pipe, but being a poorly paid miner in the Forest of Dean meant abject poverty. But no matter how short work was, Mam would always spare him a shilling pocket money. 9p went on tobacco, and 3p went on sweets, which was a pennyworth of licorice all sorts for old Auntie and Mam, and we children would get a twopenny bar of marzipan toffee to share. Old Gran should chew twist for his solace, but Dad's old pipe was a comfort that helped him to bear the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Once I remember when Dad was desperate to ease my pain, he carried me downstairs to sit on his lap by the fire at 2 o'clock in the morning. I had ramping earache. "Here, my wench, thee have a few puffs of Dad's pipe. That'll make thee pain go." So I did, and it did, for I didn't remember him carrying me back to bed. At the tender age of 14, I went to work as a domestic servant in London. On the way to the pictures on my half-day, I would pass similar pubs to the Lily Langtree. On one occasion, I went up to the beautifully etched doors and windows, and standing on tiptoe, peered inside at the fancifully engraved mirrors behind the bar that were reflecting the people sat at the tables drinking. Some were leaning on the bar. Some were engaged in a game of table skittles, while others played shove-halfpenny. I would have loved to have played both of these games, but these places were not for the likes of children. Occasionally someone would put a penny in a large musical box standing at the side of the bar, and the strains of music would fill the pub. Sometimes drunken men would reel out, nearly knocking over children that hung round the door. And now and again I would be shocked at the sight of a woman the worse for drink coming out. I suppose the bright, glamorous interior and the air of conviviality the alcohol induced in the patrons was a temporary escape from the drab, crowded slums from which most of them came. There was a special sort of music which came once a year with the fair, held in a big meadow at the Speech House in the middle of the Forest of Dean. Long before we got there, the sound of the hurdy-gurdy music put fresh life into our tired legs. The fairground was a wonderful place, which brings me to a shop, or rather the contents, which will stay forever in my memory. A shop full of musical boxes and mechanical items that will surely delight everyone. The window is full of music boxes, each one different in size and design, some being quite plain, while others are bells which are in turn struck by hammers with tiny enamelled butterflies on the end when the box is operated. Some have little Chinese mandarins or monkeys that ring the bells, and even a Chinaman that plays the drums. Inside is a huge self-player organ that towers over me, which is flanked on either side by a barrel piano, one of which is adorned with a lovely mirrored front. There are large music boxes with huge metal discs which turn when they play, and one that allows you to play a game while you are listening to the music, and all for 1 penny. But the ones I love the most are the mechanical pieces. Come on, we've got some time. Let's go in and listen to some of them now. He reminds me of the real ones that sing in the oaks round our village. He always manages to fly away before the lid closes. He never seems to catch that fish, and a good job too. Let's be very quiet now. Shh! He's heard something. Shame. He's leaving us now. Sadly, we too must leave now, along with my childhood dreams. But although the decades pass as we grow older, and the superstores with alloy fronts and plastic signs replace the old shops in your street, we can always return and go back in time to one street that will never change, the Lost Street.